Still in good nick.
Yeah, the size is no good now. It's no. Yeah, look at it, honestly. I can't get into the things.
Oh, you haven't changed a bit. That's good.
Now that's 50 years old, isn't it? But
You've grown.
Peter, can I start by talking a little bit about how you got into cricket? You were at Hereford Cathedral School.
I was, yes. I don't know. I just played at prep school to start with. 5 or 6 years old. Probably, having started that young, I should have been better than I became, but I didn't. So, but it's no. I did nothing more than you did at school. It was good because every evening after school there were nets, there was cricket all the time. Well, there was sport all the time, which the kids a lot of the time don't get today, do they? It's not the same way as happened in those days. But no, I just loved playing sport. I used to count the minutes till we could get out of the classroom, like a lot of other people.
Indeed.
And I think the other thing was that it was basically a rowing school. It's quite famous as a rowing school, but I was quite competitive, I suppose, as a young lad, and there were some other players who were useful. We had good cricket, a good standard of cricket, played against some good schools who played cricket. One of the best being Christ College Brecon, which again is a rugby school, really. But, and then when I got into the upper school, I got into the side my first year, which was 13 years of age, I suppose, and didn't get many runs. I don't think I did very well, but they persevered, and it went from there. And then, I suppose when I was about 15, Reg Perks, who you will remember, was the doyen of Worcestershire fast bowlers, played for England in the Timeless Test in Durban years later. And I played against them and I got 50 something, and Dick Howarth came over to me and said, would you be interested in coming over and having some nets with us in the following April?
Right.
And I said, yes, I'd love to, never thinking how I'd get from the little village of Cannon Pine in Herefordshire to Worcester every day for 3 weeks, which I did it for. And then I did reasonably well. I did very well at school, which kept the name there, I suppose. And then they decided at Worcester what would be a good idea for me if I went and played in the Birmingham League in the holidays, which I did. And my first match was against West Bromwich Dartmouth, and their opening bowler was Alf Gopher.
Oh, brilliant.
And then again, I had a good run there. Then I got into Worcester second team, and I played there for, I suppose, a season and a half. And then my first match was, first class match was against Cambridge. I got picked and I got runs there.
Always an opening batsman, were you?
Yes. I had batted elsewhere, but I thought it was I just wanted to get in and bat. And if you do that, you want to get in before the others in case you don't get a knock.
Absolutely.
Really, it's quite an incentive in a way, isn't it? You only have to play 2 or 3 times and not get an innings, and you think, hang on, I don't go much for this. And started from there, and I was very lucky. There were players like Don Kenyon, Eddie Cooper, people like that. See, I got into the Worcester side permanently when Eddie went to be head coach at Dartford,
Right.
Dartmouth Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. He went there, and I got in and muddled along from there on, I suppose. But I was with some good players and some helpful players, we didn't have coaches. Well, we had a coach, but he also was the George Platt. He became coach when he retired from being the head groundsman at Worcester.
Right.
But the players helped you, and this, in fact, digressing a little bit, but this is what I found in the days when I played better and better cricket up to Test match. Other players helped you, and they're far better. And in particular, I mean, one of the great helps to me was Johnny Wardle.
Really?
And a bowler, you see, and Rowley-Jenkins was a great help. Dick Howarth. Nearly all the best people to teach batsmen I've found in my career were bowlers. They thought more about it, you see, didn't they, which when you think about it. And but Johnny Wardle was and Willie Watson as well, but John was quite a big influence in not so much not necessarily technical thing, but the attitude and, you know, come on, get stuck in. You're playing like an idiot, but you might still get 50.
Yeah.
You know, he used to say that quite often. But no, getting back to this, it was just literally playing a lot. I think with a lot of good players, especially in the Birmingham League, which was a high class league.
Which club?
And I played for Stourbridge in those, and you know, the rest sort of fell into place.
And Worcester pitches in those days, good to bat on?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, they're wonderful. They really were. But that's good for the game. It produced good bowlers as well, didn't it? You see, good wickets. You don't get good snooker players on tables that aren't perfect, do you?
No.
No, they were wonderful wickets. And then the outfield. I mean, they used to play bowls. You see, at the end of play, on the outfield. Great ground. I loved it there. It's, Bob Wyatt was another person who I played under. And all I heard from Bob, and I travelled with him sometimes because we lived quite close to each other. I went through the 1932 tour of Australia about 4,000 times. I knew every ball that was bowled, I think. Yeah, and every run he scored.
Was he a Jardine fan? Was he a fan of Douglas Jardine's, Bob?
Not as non-committal in a funny sort of way, I think, to be fair. And don't forget, he was talking to a young kid. He's not going to go slating Jardine to a 16, 17-year-old, is he? But very interesting. I mean, I just loved talking to them. But no, it was the time when I came to Kent and started talking to Leslie Ames a lot, that you realise that not everybody's cup of tea, Mr. Jardine.
No.
Gully didn't like him, did he?
No.
No time at all for him.
No.
But
And how did you come to go from Worcester to Kent?
do you remember the time, 1958, 59,
Yep.
I suppose. It got to the point where they were getting rid of this amateur status business. And I was, well, let's be honest with it, I was a shamateur. I couldn't afford to play cricket as an amateur, but they wanted in those days amateur captains.
Yep.
And thereby hangs, I think, one of the big mistakes I made in life. I didn't enjoy being a captain, and I really should have chucked it in. I don't think I was very good either, but I should have chucked it in. But anyway, when it came to it, I said, well, what happens to me, you see? And I said, because I want to turn professional. I'll have to turn professional. Yeah, I wanted to turn professional. And they said, well, and I was then earning, as assistant secretary, more than the pros.
At Worcester, yep.
At Worcester.
Yep.
So they said, well, you will have to go the same as the senior pros, you see. And I said, I can't afford. You know, it was nonsense. It was quite a lot of money in those days. And I said, no, I can't do it. Anyway, they were dog in the manger. I was probably as dog in the manger as well. And so I said, look, and I forget the detail now, but there was a chap called Tomlinson, was the chairman. He was a carpet manufacturer from Kidderminster, who told me that he'd never dropped a catch in his life. So that really that pleased me no end. He said to me, this happened when I actually had dropped Well, so he said, I played the whole of my career, never dropped a catch. I said, well, jolly good. How many matches do you play? One. And that was it. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we decided to part company. Then they wouldn't let me go immediately. I had to qualify for a year, like Tom Graveney had to from
Gloucestershire.
from Gloucester to Worcester, which wasn't a bad thing because it was at the end of the Australian tour of 58-9 where we'd not had a very good tour, and I didn't have a very good tour. There were a few bent arm bowlers which didn't help, Meckiff and Rourke and those chaps, but we were the same side that 12 months earlier was as good a side as you'll ever have. And little frictions cropped up with one or two individuals, and we weren't very well managed, to be, I can say it safely now. We were badly managed. And then Colin Cowdery came to me and out there, he said, where are you going to go? And I said, well, if I play again, which I hope to, obviously, I said, Willie Watson has been talking to me about going to play in Leicester with him. I was very tempted that way because Willie was a great friend of mine, a terrific judge of the game, I always thought, fine player, and I thought I'll enjoy playing, which basically was the reason I wanted to play. I've always enjoyed it. And anyway, I suddenly thought about it, and I thought, hang on a minute, Grace Road on a cold and miserable, April, May. And then I thought of Colin then said to me, would you consider us? And I said, yeah. Then the other thing is I thought of the wickets. You see, wickets were good down here, very good. And I came down and I played. I played until I stopped enjoying it, really, and I didn't enjoy it after. I played 60, 61, 62, about 5 years. And played pretty well. But there comes a time, when you've been doing the same thing, same old grind. Also, there wasn't the incentive. I don't think I was going to get back in the England side again, which happens. And if you lose that, there's always going to be a next stage you aim for, isn't there? Whatever you do.
Yep.
Whatever you do. And I didn't have I had a bad start. No, I had a very good start to 65. And then I ran into a terrible patch. And that really, when I tell you that Blofeld thoroughly enjoys this, he was there on the field when I was bowled, the first ball of the match, Douglas Pennant, naught. Now, if you're bowled out by Douglas Pennant for naught, it is time to consider retirement. And I think it was at the end of, most of the way through that season, I said, I've had enough of this.
Going back 10 years or so to the start, your eyes were set on playing for England as soon as you got into the Worcester side, were they?
Yeah, I think I used to play test matches when I was about 10. We all did, though, didn't we? That was the ultimate thing. And since those days, became very friendly, and I'm very friendly with Neil Harvey. And I can remember playing in 1948 school match, and I got 100 the same day that he got his 100 in his first test match.
Oh, right.
And he was only 18, wasn't he, about then? Well, I would have been, he was 2 years older than me, I think. And those are the things that I remember, and I thought, God, I'd love to do that. I had a chance to do it, actually, and got out with 81 or something at Trent Bridge in the first innings. But it's not too difficult to get out to Miller, is it?
Indeed not. But by the time of this South Africa tour, you were firmly established in the team, having had a wonderful summer against Australia in '56.
Yes, I mean, again, there were so many players. You see, opening for counties, good players, high class players, every bit as good as I was. But I got 100 at Worcester against the Aussies. Then I played MCC Australians. and I got hit on the head by Ronnie Archer. Remember the ridge?
Yeah.
Well, it just flew. Can't remember seeing it at all. And it hit me on the head and went up the hill for 4. And I came off the field. I think I'd got 7 then. And I ended up by going back in the next morning and got 22 not out. And I got picked for Trent Bridge. And had a good start. Great run-out fracas with Colin, which you may have seen or heard of, but to be salvage that one. And that's the bit of luck you need, you see. I could have been run out for 7 or 8 or 9, whatever it was, easy as pie. And but you need something like that.
First 100 instead came at Old Trafford.
Yeah, that was Jim Laker's match. It's always called Jim Laker's match. The other day I read in the paper how Peter May, this is in the Telegraph, some chap was writing in there saying how Peter May had gone to Frank Tyson and said, you won't be needed this series because we're having all spinners' wickets. Well, I've never read such rubbish in my life. And I thought, oh no, I shan't bother to write, because Frank wasn't even considered. Frank played in the last test in '56 to see whether he was fit enough or whatever, and whether it was worth taking to Australia.
Yeah. And
he did go to Australia, but it was, it was that match. The wicket when we batted on the first day was a beautiful, lovely wicket. And this person writing said how it had all been cooked up and whatnot. And well, I think probably they may have mown it a little lower than normal. Now you can read what you like into that. It might have been a bit of pre-planning might have gone on there, but also what even Gubby couldn't determine was the amount of rain. You see, we had, I think, must have been 2 days of rain. At Old Trafford, we lost 12 and a half hours, I remember that. And the last test at the Oval, we lost 12 and a half hours. It was a wet summer, wasn't it?
Yep.
And I think they bowled most of it. I can't remember about the first innings, to be honest with you. I think it certainly had rained during their first innings, not ours. And interesting thing about that, I think, is that if we'd had our best left-arm bowler playing, Jim wouldn't have got 19 wickets on it.
That is the thing that strikes one about that era, is the strength of bowling. Tyson, Statham, Loader, Truman,
Bailey,
and
Laker, Lock, Wardle,
exactly.
Appleyard.
How did you choose between that?
Very difficult, isn't it? Very difficult. Very difficult. Lockie, then, you see, was in his bent the elbow a bit. Yeah. But if John Wardle had played, they might have got. Jim might have got 12 and Johnny 8 or whatever it was. But he kept his head. You see, John. With Lockie was faster than Brian Statham some of the times.
When he saw it turn, he wanted to bowl.
Oh, yeah. Whereas Jim just quietly plodded along, you see, bowled. Great bowler. One shouldn't do this, well, one shouldn't say it anyway, but I watch them now bowling bouncers halfway down the wicket all the time. That doesn't get good players out, does it?
No.
It just doesn't get good players out. These boys, you've mentioned them, you've reeled them off. We've never had a bowling side before or since like that lot to choose from, have we?
No.
Can't have done.
No.
If we had, I wouldn't want to play against them. They were fantastic, unbelievable. Bob Appleyard, for example, who we played in one test in that series, was really one of the foundations of the 55 side that won the Ashes under Len, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
No, it was riddled, and good catches, you see, as well. Yeah. I can't remember Lockie or Colin Cowdrey. I can't remember them. They must have done sometime, but I can't remember them dropping one where you went, oh, bloody hell, that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, yeah, that sort of thing. Godfrey in his prime.
Fantastic time.
Yeah, it was terrific. We know it's a good side. There's no argument about that.
Specifically in South Africa in 56-7, how do you come to the fact that Tayfield took 37 wickets and Jim Laker only about 12, I think?
I don't know. Probably, I don't know. You can look it up in the book. Probably Tayfield might have bowled twice as many overs for a start.
Right.
But he was so accurate. But so was Jim. I mean, no, I can't answer your question. I would have thought Jim was the better bowler on all wickets. Tayfield was probably on those hard. They were good hard wickets, bouncy wickets. Was probably a better bowler over a Test match period, over 5 days, and bowling lots. I mean, he bowled something like 40 odd overs non-stop at one stage, I think. Might have been at Durban. Probably could have done against Trevor, because Trevor was in most of the day for a few. But no, that's a good question, because Jim got how many that series against Australia? Mind, different wickets, you see.
42, I think.
Yeah, different wickets. But Tayfield was terrific. Flighter. He's a flighter of the ball. Not a huge spinner,
No.
but he was so accurate. And he bowled sort of middle and leg, you see. He bowled an unusual... Peter May, best player we've produced, in my opinion, since the war, averaged 14. And Towie got him out, I think, most of the time. But, no, he was a great bowler. He also, you see, I think that people might have had a little dart at him occasionally, because you've got Trevor Goddard bottling it up at the other end, certainly to the right-handers, which was a bigger problem there.
Left arm over at the leg stump.
At the leg, middle and leg stump, all the time. And he drifted it a bit. Do you remember Don Smith?
Yes.
Well, he's the same sort of bowler. Very much better, obviously, but the same sort of bowler as Don, who bowled middle and leg, left arm over.
Keeper standing up?
Standing up, yes. John Waite, wasn't it, kept wicket in that series? Yeah. Keeper standing up. I think we've chatted about this before. At Durban, Wally Hammond was at the cricket, and he watched it. And I remember somebody saying to him, what do you think? And he said, I don't know where I would have started against this when I played. Which is quite interesting, because he could play, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Just a bit. But he said, I don't know how I would have started to play it. Because you can't actually... And he had these two people in front, as did Tony Tayfield. Always had these two short mid-ons. That, 8 or 10 yards away, no more. And and the ball bouncing... you're going to get a few. They were Headley Keith. Do you remember Headley Keith? He caught some wonderful catches there. It was really tough cricket. It wasn't there to be enjoyed, but you tried very hard to enjoy it. It was. Then they had Heine and Adcock,
who were both genuinely
yes,
great.
yeah. Adcock was the quicker of the two. Heine, the nastier of the two. Probably tended, again, like these, if I look back on it, probably might have bowled a bit. He enjoyed hitting people. There are people like that, aren't there? He bowled a shorter length than Adcock, but he wasn't unpleasant. He was just a very difficult player to play against. Tall, aggressive, good bowler.
And as you say, supported by very, very keen fielders.
Best fielding side I've seen.
Right.
And this was just pre-Colin Bland, even, you see. Yes. But they were terrific. They really were. Yeah, definitely the best fielding side that I've seen.
Did they practice and train harder than the
Yeah,
other sides?
they did more than we did. Yeah, they did more. Even on tour here, I can remember them in '55. Jack Cheatham's team every morning out half an hour. Not all this aerobics. It wasn't all like they do now. You know, come dancing or whatever. They actually fielded, hitting, throwing at stumps, and it wasn't a physical training exercise. It was they practiced cricket functions, and limbered up. You know, I mean, it was very difficult to see to see people like Jim Laker limbering up. Jim didn't. Jim just went on and bowled, didn't he? It was different, but I just feel that people did what they wanted to do. Like you read now about Andrew Strouth wanting players to take on more responsibility.
Right, yeah.
Well, you did then, and I agree with him, and I think it's quite a good idea. You can't go around like a flock of sheep, all doing the same thing at the same time. You can't do it. And that's where I wonder what all these coaches do, you see. I don't know what they do. We had on the tour, all the tours that I did, we had a manager, a physiotherapist, score and baggage man, who became the general administrator. That was George Duckworth. Yeah. Wonderful man. Called everybody by their surname.
Did he?
Yeah. Yeah. What did you play that show for, Richardson? Yeah, he didn't suffer fools gladly. You had probably four more. And George did the scoring and the baggage, a manager, physiotherapist. I think
that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. We took Australia '58. We had a manager, an assistant manager, because of the financial side of it. In Australia, where you took so much of the outer, and you know all about this, the same as I. Unfortunately, our assistant manager, who was known as Cash to the team, couldn't transfer Australian pounds into English pounds, which our expenses on our accounts were in English pounds. And anybody like Godfrey who'd come back from Gloucester Park after a night at the Trots with 200 or 300 quid of Australian money would say to Cash, will you put this back, credit my account with this please, Cash, will you? Yes. What is it? He says 300 Australian. Ah, we've got a problem here. Yeah, your account's in sterling. Well, you don't have to be too bright, do you? 25 Australian shillings was £1 English. Never made it.
Right.
No, never made it. Now, that was a disastrous appointment, that was. It was a lovely man. I mean, you couldn't get cross, but it was chaotic.
But South Africa was a hell of a long tour, wasn't it?
Well, they all were, weren't they, in those days?
You started playing in October, you came back in March, and you left when? Beginning of October?
From Australia?
No, to
South Africa. We went on first week in October, was it? Something like that. Came back in, might have been the end of March, beginning of April.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By sea both ways?
No, optional coming back. Yeah. Now, those of us without wives and girlfriends came back by sea.
All right.
The others flew back. There were only about 4 of us on the ship. Freddie, the manager, starting to detox on the way back. And Fred, Alan Oakman, myself, Colin Cowdery, Roy Sweatman. No, Roy was not there. Who was that? Brian Taylor was the other wicketkeeper. Yep. Yeah, not Roy. Yeah, should have been Roy, or John Murray, but it wasn't. It was Taylor, who had a torrid time. Bless his heart. It was very difficult for him because Godfrey wasn't much of a help. He went. I remember Brian Taylor going up to Godfrey saying, "Look, any help you can give me, I'll be, a good receiver of any advice or Nothing to it, said Godfrey, nothing to it. He said, stand, put your gloves on, get your pads on, put your gloves on, stand behind the wicket, and if they miss it, you catch it and chuck it back.
Great.
That
Very
was,
simple.
yeah, that was, it was a tremendous help. And of course, then he had to play to keep,
To Wardle.
who did only bowled 4 overs of orthodox the whole tour.
Is that right?
Bowled all those. And, oh, wonderful. But, oh dear, we played these up-country matches, sort of, which we did, you see, in those days. There were matches between test matches.
Yeah.
Well, even in Australia, the last one.
And you had 2 months of playing matches before the first test. Middle of October.
That's right, because we played, I think, excuse me, we started in Pal. My memory is, I'm testing now, but we started in Pal, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, Johannesburg, Transvaal, we played there. Then we went up to Rhodesia, as it was then, sorry. And then came back. Yes, it would have been. It was the beginning of December was the first test, wasn't it?
Well, I think almost Christmas. Yeah.
Well, as it was in Australia, you see, we started in Perth, went round the coast, and the Gabba was, Brisbane was, I think, beginning of December again. But
So, did the atmosphere change? I mean, socially, did you get a bit more serious about the cricket when the tests started?
that's a loaded one. That's a beauty. I think we enjoyed the tours. We enjoyed them. I think, yeah. I mean, you know, if you, as the bachelors did anyway, took a pretty girl out for dinner, it wasn't splashed all over the papers the next day. Equally, as long as you were doing all right. You know, if you kept getting naught and you were seen out at night, well, then you'd get some stick, which I think is fair enough. But overall, no, it was. My experience of the press was quite good. I think there were a couple of odd ones, which you'll know about better than I will. But overall, I would say that we were treated fairly well, and on occasions leniently.
And there were a few experienced old hands like Godfrey Evans and Dennis Compton in particular, who
But they weren't
were
at
used to enjoying life.
They weren't at the end of the queue. No, they were. You see, the other thing is that those tours. I went as a young player, and I'd been to Pakistan on the A tour in '55, then South Africa, then Australia, and then after that, when I came back again, I did India, Pakistan, and so on. But the first 3 tours, I was one of the youngest members of the tour, of the team, and we'd arrive in a city and not know anybody. All these pros, the old Kings, the Comptons, they'd been there 3 or 4 times. They knew everybody. Everybody knew them. So, funnily enough, off the field, you could go 1 or 2 days between matches when you didn't see much of them. But, and I can remember my first experience with I shared rooms with Dennis in South Africa, which is a nightmare, inevitably. 6:30 every morning. Parkers, they used to call me Parkers, tea please. And because he was a god, you made the tea, you see. It wasn't, you know. And but we were on we stayed at the Edward Hotel, and we're sitting there on the stoop having a drink, and along came a chap and said to Dennis, we've got a big party on tomorrow night, 7:30 at our house, would love you to come. Oh, I'd love to, he said, love to come. So that was that. About 20 minutes later, somebody else would come along and say, by the way, tomorrow night, Dennis, we've got a braai at so-and-so, 6:30 to 7 o'clock, and then it'll go on from there. Would love you to come if you've got anything on. No, I've got nothing on, I'd love to go. This happened 3 and 4 times. Well, you know Compo. Couldn't say no to anybody, could he, you see? And of course, you used to get then you've got the bad name, Compton didn't turn up. But it wasn't him, it was just
His nature.
his nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't say no. And then you'd remind him saying, oh, really? That's what you go, oh, really? Yeah.
So who? There must have been a rein kept by the likes of Freddie Brown and Peter May. You know, you all had to be there at whatever time it was on the ground.
Yeah, Peter May.
How tight a rein?
Peter May did all that. Yes, Fred didn't, in case he wasn't there himself. Yeah, no, Fred was probably meeting the Dewars representative with a case of, which always went into the manager's office in the bedroom. Yeah, but
Although
no,
he played a game, I see.
but
Freddie Brown played at least one match.
he did in New Zealand, didn't he? Did he in Australia, in South Africa?
I think I saw that.
Oh, I can't remember that. No, can't remember that. I think I only missed 2 matches on the tour. I broke that one there, a finger in Queenstown, and I missed 1 match in Salisbury, Harare, as they call it now. That's an extraordinary thing about the tour, you know. Peter May, outside of the tests, averaged about 130 or something.
Yep.
He got 600s and a 200. You couldn't tell that to anybody and expect them to believe it. And then averaged 14
Extraordinary.
in the series.
Did he lose confidence?
Yeah, but he'd never burden anybody with it. You're bound to, aren't you? You can't go on being, buoyant and optimistic. I mean, if you do it in the first test, you miss out in the first test. Well, that can happen to anybody. Maybe the first innings or the second innings or the second test. But when it goes third, fourth, he got, I think, a 50 in one of the test matches.
Durban, I think.
I think he may have 61 or 2 or something like that. But no, it certainly was a nuisance for us because, I mean, you take his runs out and there was a bit of a gap between Peter and the rest of us.
Well, indeed.
Wasn't there, as players?
Yeah.
And we were short of players, you see, as well.
Why didn't Tom Graveney, who went on 2 small tours and got lots of runs that winter, why wasn't he in the side?
Well, there's a little bit of see and there's a little bit of hearsay. We had nets on the Wednesday of the Old Trafford Test match, and Tom came in and said he'd been hit on the hand and didn't think they were going to give it the night to see if it got better. I don't know anybody who can say who hit him on the hand, but on the other hand, it was decided that he wouldn't play. And I think it's left to the player in the end, at the end of the day. And that was that. And the team for South Africa the party for South Africa was being announced between the 4th and the 5th test. And Tom wasn't in it. And then, of course, the speculation started as to why. And there was a rumour went round, which could have been right, might have been wrong, I don't know, but that Gubby thought that he was fit to play, and Gubby thought that the reason he made himself unavailable was if he failed in the Old Trafford test, he might not go.
Right.
Now, if he thought that, it might have been grossly unfair, but on the other hand, Gubby was Gubby, wasn't he, in those days, and if he made up his mind and got something into his head, as sound a judge as he was, I mean, he was a wonderful judge of cricketers, he decided that Tom, it was a tactical withdrawal. I think that's what somebody put it as. Now, I know Tom pretty well, and to be truthful, I don't go along with that. I couldn't go along with that because he just loved playing cricket.
Yeah.
And anybody, I think, I mean, it was the best tour I ever went on. Wonderful tour, wonderful country. Apart from the team, lovely people, not so keen on 7:13, but there we are. But, so I don't go along with that. But I think there's a little bit of food for thought as to that might have been something behind that thought, judgment by Gubby. But you see, without Tom, we had Jim Parks. You see, extraordinary thing with Jim.
Yes.
Jim got on the aeroplane, came out on the ship, came out with us, and then was it blurred vision or something like that? It got blurred vision, and they didn't seem to know what to do with it out there, so they said, you go back home and have it seen to. And he came back to England, so Jim's a fine player, so we're without Jim, so we're a batsman short, aren't we? And we've got only one opening batsman.
Yeah, I mean, the other one who might have gone surely...
Oakey might have gone in
Yes,
first,
yep.
but it was no good putting Oakey in, bless his heart, and one of the great men and the great tourists of all time. No good putting him in against Heine and Adcock, because it was 1 foot down the wicket, wasn't it? But he got a great 100 at Bloemfontein, I remember that. But that it wasn't on, so he became the social manager.
Peter, we were talking about the batting. Why didn't Colin Cowdrey open as he had with great success in 1956?
That was a great pity. He got it in his head that he wasn't an opening batsman. Len Hutton had told him that he was, and that should be good enough for most people, wouldn't it? But he just didn't want to go in first. He went against Australia and did well, reluctantly. He was quite funny because he thought it was a joke, him being sent in first. And I said, it's not a joke at all. He said, well, I'm not an opening batsman. He said, there's Reg Simpson, there's all these people. And I said, well, get on with it. And he played well. We all got out, I think, early on at Leeds, and that was on a real green one, the first morning that was. But no, when he got out there, I mean, I can't think of a place that would have been better for him to have gone in first.
Because?
His technique.
Right.
He was, if you want anybody to bat technically, you would say, go and watch Colin Cowdrey. Go and watch Cowdrey now. I mean, his balance, his timing. He was a games player, wasn't he? You see, he could throw, he could run, he could, for a big man, quite quick. He could catch. He was a rackets player, very high quality. He could play anything. He could play golf. Whatnot. It wouldn't have been a problem, except if you sent him in first and put a 5 in front of his name, he'd have been happy. He just didn't like to be 1 or 2. It was very strange for such a great player. He was a great player. But whereas other people with half the ability can't wait to get there. Here we are.
Yes.
Couldn't wait to get in for. You're more likely to get out. Obviously, it's more difficult to start there than anywhere else. But if you get used to it and you play it, it's the people. One thing you realise that the people who go to watch the cricket, actually, a side like the England side then, don't actually go to watch Richardson and Oakman, do they? They go to watch Cowdrey, May and Compton.
Yeah.
So if you go in first and keep them waiting all day, that means they come back tomorrow, so it's good for the gate. It's a wonderful theory.
Well, that was obviously your theory in the first test, when you got 100 in 8 hours.
Yeah, that evening we were given a big part. It was Christmas Eve and Boxing Day, and it was Christmas Eve, if I remember rightly. And we were given a big party by a chap called Eric Gallo, who was the head of Decca in Johannesburg. And I'm standing with Oakey and talking to some people there. And one lady said to me, did you go to the cricket today? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, I do hope that man who batted all day is more fun socially than he is on the field. So Oakman left immediately, couldn't wait to tell everybody. But she did, she piled in, and I didn't say anything. I thought, I'm not going to walk into this one too easily. But that was the party, just a digression here from batsmen and whatnot. Doug Insole, very quick and a writer, very quick brain, humour and whatnot, got hold of Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love,
Right.
an old card, and wrote a set of lyrics for it. And Eric Gallo said, what's the choir? And he roped in myself, Willie Watson, Doug and Peter May. And we went to a recording studio and recorded it.
All right.
Well, honestly, it was so embarrassing. We realised then there were 4 people there couldn't sing. But there were also, all the lyrics were,
Can you remember what was the
well, I can
the
remember
title?
some. There was one wonderful line which said Crawford lines them up and Bray does it, which was on about their social activities on the tour. Yeah, and there were things like that. But it was very good. But we had everybody was given a recording of it. I don't know where mine is. It's gone somewhere. But no, it's
You mentioned earlier that you used to go with Alan Ross, wonderful writer.
yeah.
To jazz
Well,
clubs.
I found out I'd never met Alan before we got out there, and they came out a little bit later than the team. He came out he travelled, you see. He wrote this wonderful book called Cape Summer, and which included his travels between the matches and all. It was lovely. And we found that we both got a great love. I'd had this great love of jazz from in the war, listening to AFN, which is the American Forces Network, and they used to have all these jazz programs, which you didn't get here, you see. And I developed this great love of jazz, which I still got to this day, and Alan was the same. And we used to go off at nights and find out where the jazz clubs were in the towns we went to. And used to go and listen to some wonderful musicians you've never heard of, but they were terrific. But they were all mainly the black community.
Had the sort of hard and fast apartheid come in by then? I mean, were whites in one entrance, blacks in another?
Yes, there was, because, well, you see, all the blacks in those days, I mean, they all supported us, but they were all segregation in terms of in the grounds,
Yeah.
in the sands. It was. Well, it's another story, hopefully, isn't it? That is now. It's
But did when you went into these clubs, did they know who you were? Did they know you were England cricketers?
So yeah, sometimes one or two would recognise. I mean, it wasn't just. Roy Sweatman, not Roy. Who was it they used to come with? Well, Brian Taylor used to come as well.
Doug Insole, I think.
And Doug Insole was very keen.
was
Doug
jazz,
Insole was
yeah.
at school with Johnny Dankworth
Ah,
at George Monarch's school in Essex. And Doug used to come along as well. And so yeah, they did. But I mean, they were all so nice. They loved their music and they loved their cricket, and they
Yeah.
didn't want all the hassle.
Yeah.
I don't know, we had some great evenings.
But going back to the batting, Doug had a pretty good tour too.
Yeah, but he got 100. He got a not out 100, which helped the average. But he's a good player, wasn't he? He had his own way of playing, which we all do. Let's be honest about it. But he played. He got 100, I think, in Durban. 107 not out, or something like, which was the backbone of the innings. Then I mean, we had that match sewn up to go 3 up after 3, and it's another story of this. But it's some of the old white coats weren't too good when it mattered. They were pretty poor, and they even Peter Loader, who bowled as well as anybody on that tour, wonderful. He really was terrific. He and Godfrey had a signal for the slower ball,
Right.
and we didn't know what it was, and I don't know to this day. But they, as long as they did, that's all that mattered. And Godfrey used to creep up. You see, when after Lotus started his run, Godfrey used to creep up. Well, of course, they weren't having that, were they? Oh God, we had a hiatus in Durban. The match stopped, and a chap called Milan was one of them, and another man called Costello, and the lads kept calling him Abbott. And he didn't appreciate it at all. It was ridiculous. But there was some friction in that match all the way through it, to be honest with you. And one of them was there was going to be no 3-0 up on the last day. That was quite apparent. And and the other funny thing was Kenny Funston, who couldn't play Johnny Wardle for more than an over without getting out if you'd given him a million. And he panics, you see, and all he used to do was sweep. Right. And he hit this thing straight back to John, a little dolly, and of all the people in the side, he dropped it.
Oh.
When he got about 8 or 10, and he got 60-something in the end. And that really stopped us. We'd still have won the match if John had caught that. But on the other hand, as he'd taken about wickets galore, you couldn't moan at him.
No.
So,
and he was...
Then we had a handball in Cape Town against John Russell Endine.
Indeed.
Picked it up.
Remind me what happened there.
Well, I can't... Well, all I can really think... I mean, you know, there's me stuck out a deep square leg or somewhere. Right. And... he played the ball down and it spun back and it's going back to the wicket, and he put his hand down, picked it out, chucked it back to Johnny Wardle.
He actually caught it?
Yeah, he caught it, yeah. And, it didn't take long for somebody to say appeal, did it? And he was on his way then, so... But, that was at Cape Town, which... I've been down there recently, and it's they've taken all the oaks away. You've been there since then, haven't you?
Yep.
Which is sad. It was such a lovely, it was a social asset, wasn't it, down there?
It was like a club ground, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's gone now, but there we are. But it was a wonderful tour, and the travel. We went all up round the game parks. We went up the Niagara Falls, the Victoria Falls. Glad it wasn't the Niagara. Might have been in the wrong place. We went, and then being a farmer's son, you see, I kept getting invited to go to all these amazing farms and the sugar farms and things like that. So it was very educational as well, and socially it was terrific. I mean, you didn't actually meet anybody who hadn't got oodles of oodle.
Really?
And it was quite comfortable touring.
The hotel's good?
We had a poor one called the Victoria in Johannesburg, but they had a wonderful jazz group there, as they did at a place called the Waldorf in Cape Town. And the pianist there was a chap called Nolan Ranger, and we used to go in there, sit down and listen, and they were very, very good. But I mean, never had to put a hand in a pocket.
Really?
It was, I mean, I can think of some cricketers who really enjoyed that. Can't you? And Lester Piggott, he would have led the way there as well. But no, it was memorable. I can't. It was by far the best and the most enjoyable, and the team were happy. You see, without the team being happy, right. It's not much fun. Australia 58-9 was.
Yes, I was going to. I mean, could you see the? I mean, you were on paper the best side in the world, but it was actually a drawn series. Was the start of the decline?
Yeah.
Even then,
yeah.
do you think?
Yeah. I'm not sure. No, I wouldn't have said. If I couldn't have said coming away from there. I couldn't have said we're just going over the top. No. You see, the side had been, not me, but no, half the side. But half the side would have been together since 52 of India. Fred, you see, but we didn't have Fred, you see, on the tour.
No.
either. That's another thing I'd forgotten about.
Yeah.
But then you had 53, 54, 5 was Ashes win in Australia. 55, we beat South Africa at home, didn't we, in 55? Bit lucky to do that with the last test, I think. But then 56, no tour, and that's right, we went on the A tour to Pakistan. Then 56, 7.
57
50,
West Indies.
Yeah, it had
Yep.
5 years, you see, most of the team.
But you were almost spoilt for choice, really, weren't you, in the bowling particularly?
Oh, I mean, I think of the players that, I mean, you think that when I was in the side, Frank Lowson wasn't. Don Kenyon had a chance and didn't take it, but Frank was a magnificent player, Frank Lowson. Who else was there? There were probably others. I can't think at the moment, but
Red Simpson you mentioned.
if you got in and got runs, they were loyal to you. Well, there can't be anything else if you get runs, really, but overall, very few people were mucked about. They weren't. But we had. This is another aspect. Look at the selectors we had. There was Gubby was chairman, and then there was the captain, whoever that was, Peter, mainly in my time. But then there was Tom Dollery for a while, Wilf Wooler for a while. Wilf was more difficult because he wanted all Glamorgan players in the England side with Wilf, but all experienced players.
Yeah.
Wilf wasn't a test player, but he was an international rugby player. He knew sport backwards. He knew temperaments backwards. Very good on. No, don't like him. Don't like him. He goes red when he's frightened, or he had a theory for things. Leslie Ames. You can't buck those people in their judgment, can you? It's
No.
they were.
Did they cling
But
on?
now you've got. I don't know what you've got now. What have you got now?
Well, yeah, that's another story.
Yeah. That'll be chapter 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did they cling on to Dennis Compton too long with his knee?
Well,
Do
he
you
came back and got 90 odd, didn't he?
Yeah, in '56.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have
Yeah.
said yes. He wasn't. If you look back on it, he probably wasn't fit enough to do a tour, and hard grounds as well with the old knee. That doesn't help. But he had that wonderful year with Gubby, you see, when they brought back David Shepherd, brought back Cyril Washbrook, and then Compo at the Oval. And
They all came off.
well, 98, 94 and 100. What more do you want than that?
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think of the other players who were.
Well,
I mean, there are other players who.
Willie Watson.
Willie, you see, Billy could go in first. He and I went in first in Australia together. But super, terrific player. Funny enough, his figures in test matches don't justify how good he was, which I suppose at the end of the day, it's figures that count, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
But so a wonderful player. But there was people like still top class, Jack Robertson
Yes.
at that time. Still,
Indeed.
all this business about you need to be 18 years or young and whatever. You can be a good player at any age, can't you? But,
And Jim Parks was just unlucky. I mean,
well, Jim,
he'd been picked on merit.
I've never known anybody. Jim came on the tour to Pakistan with us, where Kenny Barrington, myself, had good tours and therefore got a foot in the. No, now Jim had already played against Pakistan, I think, when he came on that tour. But I've never known anybody, and I can safely say this, given out more times to terrible LBW decisions than Jim was in Pakistan. I mean, the old finger was going up like tracer bullets. They were, poor Jim, every time they hit him on the pad. And at the end of it, people forget that, don't they? They come back and they say, oh, he didn't get many runs. But Jim got back in, you see, he was in the squad, in the 12 for the first test against Australia at Trent Bridge, 56. And then he didn't play off that, but it was coming on the tour. Missed out there, you see. And then he came back as a wicketkeeper.
The one we haven't really talked about is the man who took these cine films, Trevor Bailey. I mean, what a cricketer!
The Boyle, yeah, yeah. I opened with more times the Trevor than anybody else. When I was batting with him, when I got hit by Heine, and they all gathered round, this was in Johannesburg, in that first test match, and they all gathered round, and up strolls the Boyle from the other end. He's known as the Boyle, I don't know what reason, originally anyway, but he stood by Heine, that's right, and said, "You all right, Richo?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm all right, I'll be all right." He said, "But he's not fast enough to hurt you." Bloody Peter Heine went absolutely wild. Of course, the next 10 minutes they were sailing over our heads, but
he was. I mean,
but he came.
very
You see,
shrewd.
he bowled. He got 5 for something, for not many, on the last day of that Test match, on a beautiful wicket. Moved it all over the place, off the seam. Nobody knows how or why, but God, did he try! Wonderful.
And took a brilliant catch somewhere. I can see a picture of him diving.
Was that I remember him
think
catching him a wonderful one of Harvey at Lord's in '56. Oh no, he was. He could be a real nuisance. Last instructions for the tour to South Africa. Other than the cricket bag, only 1 piece of luggage allowed. He arrives with about 4. And Gubby said, I shouldn't really allow you to go. You're just being stupid. And just shrugged his head and wandered off. No, he's
William.
the other one I remember about Trevor was we played on the old rugby ground in Pretoria called the Loftus Versfeld or something like that it was. And we played on this dirt track and we bowled them out, and we're batting with 10 minutes to go. And not a test match, this was against somebody else, Transvaal, I think. Anyway, he came on and he pushed forward at Tayfield and it went off his pad there, and they all went up and he's given up. Last over of the day, so we all go in. And I'll never forget it, to my dying day, we're in there 10 minutes after, I'm stripped off, ready to go and have a shower and whatnot, and somebody looks out of the window and said, "Come and have a look at this." So we all go to the window. The ground is deserted, except for one person still standing at the crease. Trevor. This was a good 10 minutes. He refused to come in. And it was so funny. God, he was. But he weren't competitive, unbelievable. And a high-class cricketer. He was a high-class cricketer. But,
and a final question, Peter. The pitches, I mean, the scoring was slow generally. Were they?
Yeah. Well, that was due to the way they bowled. You see. Right. Well, scoring. Our lads bowled beautifully. I mean, they really did. I mean, it's not being biased or anything. So therefore, they weren't going to flog our lot all over the ground. No. Equally, they had their fast bowlers, and John Watkins and whatnot as well came in as well, and they just bowled like this and like this, and they bowled. I don't know how many overs they are, but you couldn't score many very quickly anyway. It was like batting against, remember Gordon Rourke, you see, the Aussie? He bowled bouncers, wides, all over the place. And he was so quick that unless he bowled it straight, that you could push it here, push it, you couldn't do anything about it. So, slow play again. There's all sorts of reasons for slow play, isn't there?
Yeah.
But,
well, you came to the final test still 2-1 up.
Yeah.
And you played on a relayed pitch.
Quite ridiculous it was. But the first thing is we lost, I think, Brian Statham and Johnny Wardle. I think they were injured. Frank Tyson came in. Yes, I mean, they batted first when the ball didn't rise at any time more than a foot. And in the end, it was down to just 2 inches. It was hopeless for people like me who were back players, you see.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I got 0 and 3, I think. Just had the wrong technique to play on that wicket. Perfect for Trevor. The old forward defensive plod, you see. He was there for hours. Again. They hated him. They did. And he loved it. But it was just ridiculous wicket to play cricket. But Frank, when he bowled, I can't remember a great deal about the thing. It wasn't a very good match. But Frank took 6 wickets, I think, for almost nothing in one of the innings. And it was his first match. He was ill on the tour, wasn't he?
He got tonsillitis, I think.
Or yes, I did. He was out for quite a while, and he came back. But the thing I remember as much as anything else about that match was I saw the greatest exhibition of wicket-keeping I have ever seen. Godfrey nearly stood up to Frank. Now, Frank may not have been as quick as he was in 54-5 in Australia, but he was still quick by anybody's standards. And, well, Godfrey said otherwise. By the time it got to him, it was along the floor, you see. Yeah. And he stood up. I tell you, you can ask anybody who played in that match. I can remember Johnny Waite talking about it after the game, saying that was a star performance. And of course he loved it. He loved it. He was all over the place. But he knew that he was as good. They say he was at his best in 51 in Australia, 50-51. But I think he said, I don't think I've ever kept better under more adverse conditions than that. But it was just a miserable game of cricket. It was just...
And Peter, when you decided to hang up the boots, did you? What did you do for?
Well, you see, all the time I was playing, I got the farm. You see, I was farmer's son. I got a farm about 10 miles from here, and very often on the I'd get up at 5 and milk. It's a dairy farm. Before I ever went to play cricket.
Right.
And it's when the herdsmen had their day off, I used to have to stand in, and which I loved it. I loved farming, and I would have gone on farming, but the price of land had got out of my bracket by then. You see, it had gone from £100 an acre to £1,000 an acre, and you know, it was ridiculous. I mean, it's a lot more since then, but you could probably run 400 acres with one person, but you know, it was getting the extra land to make it worthwhile, and kids at school had to be paid for, and so I eventually got involved in a sports promotions company, and that's where I stayed until I finished. And in the end, I did my own thing. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and packed up, I suppose, what is it now, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and it wasn't by choice. I would have farmed all my life. I loved it, but you know, the things don't work out that way, and I'd have needed another 200 acres to make it a viable thing, and I couldn't. I wasn't in that financial bracket because cricket. Kerry Packer hadn't arrived then to help the cricketer, had he?
No.
But now I've got a piece of paper upstairs, taken I think out of the Times, which showed the 1907 earnings of our players. There's this is without sponsorships or anything. This is ECB payments and retainers and whatever they have. 594,000 Collingwood. Harmison took, well, whatever wickets he took, which weren't very many, they were £9,000 a piece. That's what he got. For, you know, if he took 24 wickets, it was 24 times 9,000, which is I mean, unbelievable. There nobody less Vaughan, good player. Good player. Michael Vaughan hardly played. He was way down at 292,000. Freddie Flintoff didn't play at all. He was 349. I emailed it off to all the lads straight away, where we got. I can remember in Australia, sitting at the MCG in the dressing room, and in came a chap who I recognised straight away, with Colin Cowdrey. Jack Nicholas came in and sat down, and there was Test match Boxing Day, I think it was, 70 or 80,000 people. And he sat there and he watched this for a while, and he said, you're all professional cricketers. Well, without complicating it, Colin said, yes, we're all professional cricketers. Yeah. Excuse me being personal, he said, but what are the earnings for this? Oh no, how many matches do you play on the tour? He said, well, we play the 5 test matches, and then there's 2 in New Zealand, and we play all together, which we did, I think you'll find, about 30 matches. I see, he said, yeah. And then he said, would it be rude to ask how much you get paid? And I think Colin said something like £2,000 or what. He said, oh, fair. He said, that's quite a lot. So just for playing cricket out here, you get something like 70 or 80,000 pounds a piece. So there was a definitely. We actually got £675, but he thought we got that for each match. You see, yeah. I think it was a bigger figure than that. That's just me off the top of my head. Yeah. But he couldn't believe it. He said, "But how many people here?" I was 80. He just couldn't understand it. He didn't understand and he was no fool. He said, "Well, that's something wrong."
Yeah. Well, they say that was the genesis of Packer, that Rodney Marsh's brother played professional golf.
Yeah.
And same sort of story. Just couldn't believe.
No, I know.
How little they earned.
I played with Graham quite a few times. His brother, Rod's brother. But yeah, I know it's. But this upstairs, I've got it handy. I'll just.
Yeah, no, I know.
Let me just show it to you.